I'm gonna be completing the entire Pokemon franchise in chronological order in a hardcore Nuzlocke setting and with one huge challenge in front of me. No repeats. End up using a Tepig and Black version? Well, you're not getting it anywhere else. Strap in as we head through all 39 mainline North American Pokemon releases from Red and Blue all the way through Scarlet and Violet. Speaking of which, I'd highly suggest watching the previous videos first to see which Pokemon have been used, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Let's get into it. So, it's been about 2 weeks since we've jumped out of Gen 4 and into Gen 5. I definitely needed a small break after, we led into Scarlet and Violet just so that I could get my brain ready for what came with it, and I've certainly enjoyed what I've played so far of the Paldea region, but we are nowhere close to it. We still need to get through Galar, Alola, Kalos, and this video's subject, Unova. My favorite Pokemon generation's first half ends up making the no repeats part a somewhat moot point, since we cannot access any Gen 1 through Gen 4 Pokemon before the post-game, though once we get into White version, then reintroducing Gen 1 to 4 Pokemon in the second half next time around, we'll start seeing the true challenge that Unova has to offer. Both Black and White have the 8 gym leaders, the rival fights against Cheren and Bianca, the Elite Four, N, Ghetsis, the Elite Four rematches, and the champion Alder. After all, a Nuzlocke should really end up with the champion, with the exception of Johto due to Red, and you know what, I guess these games as well due to Cynthia. Why not, right? Her fight caps out at the same level as Alder, and it would be a pretty fitting end to each adventure. So strap in, as we're going to town with Black and White as it begins now. So, the starter that I'm going to be choosing here in Black version is Tepig, a strong physical attacker and the last of the firefighting trio. Emboar eventually boasts some amazing coverage moves like Wild Charge and Head Smash, alongside powerful stab options like Brick Break and Heat Crash, or if you're more daring, Flare Blitz. After tackling the bejesus out of Bianca Snivy and Cheren's Oshawott, we're able to head out onto Route 1 for our first bout of EV training. So, EV training is a wee bit easier in Gen 5 due to the way EXP scaling starts working, especially once we get to be around the level 10 mark, still fighting level 2s. We're gaining very little EXP, while also being able to max out our EVs, though there is a little bit of a problem. There are no other wild Pokemon before Striaton City, outside of Patrat, Lillipup, and Purloin. The first two give attack, and Purloin gives speed, which is actually perfect for Tepig, but it will be frustrating once we get into some later encounters, because this doesn't change very much. We take the time to get to level 10 off of exclusively level 2s, so we get as many EVs as possible, then head up into Accumula Town and lay the smacketh down on N's Purloin with 2 tackles, getting the running shoes on Route 2 and heading up towards Striaton City, but get interrupted for a battle against Bianca first. Thankfully, we're not fighting Cheren yet, so we've got the type advantage, plus a level advantage, making it a pretty easy time. She leads with Lillipup, normally a 2-shot with Tackle, but with a potion, we gotta use a few more attacks, shifting to Ember to take it out as Snivy comes out second. And of course, Fire-type go brrr against Grass-type, thank you Ember, and goodbye. So the second encounter we're going to grab over in the Dream Yard is Pansage, a gift Pokemon in order to cover our weakness against the Striaton City Gym. Unfortunately, that means we end up burning our Dream Yard encounter on that instead of getting Munna, but I get the feeling that Munna's just not in the cards for Gen 5 because of that conundrum, and of course, Striaton City being blocked off until post-game in Black and White too. With Pansage in hand though, thankfully another Pokemon that benefits from being EV trained in physical attack and speed, we're finally ready to take out Cheren in the Trainer School. Cheren leads off with Oshawott, going down to 2 of Pansage's Vine Whips, even with an Oranberry equipped, doing nothing thanks to a burned turn on Tail Whip as Purloin comes in second. I swap into Tepig here to see Assist, calling forth Tail Whip, which really no big deal, I'll just lay him with Ember, as Purloin uses Growl next turn. Oh, you fool, you blithering idiot, that's not the right attack reduction. Another Ember fells the Purloin, opening up the Striaton City Gym for me to face off against. Since we chose Tepig, Crest will be our assigned fight, and it's really not that hard. Lillipup does not have a stab normal type attack, instead only having bite and work up for some reason, so this is an easy KO with Tepig, using tackle and 2 embers, only taking a single bite for less than a third, before Panpour comes in second. Now this only has water gun and work up, so we can swap into Pansage, resist his water gun, and despite that work up being able to up his special attack, I can safely go for 2 Vine Whips for the KO and the win. No harm done. So, after taking care of Team Plasma over in the Dream Yard, we can head out on the other side of Striaton City onto Route 3, running straight into another battle with Cheren. He's leading off with Oshawott here, as I go with Pansage, going for Vine Whip, then upon seeing a Focus Energy, I figure I can get away with going for a workup here, blasting him next turn with another Vine Whip to KO following a Water Gun, then just blasting his follow-up Purloin to KO and win the fight. Easy as pie. Workup access, by the way, this early is just absolutely bonkers for how generic the move is and how many Pokemon can learn it. It just pushes fights into my favor far more than it would be normally. Before taking more Team Plasma Grunts to the grave, I'm able to find a new encounter on Route 3 in Blitzel, another Pokemon that wants to be trained in physical attack and speed. And while it sounds like we're going overkill on the physical attack department, this Electric Zebra actually does a really good job with it, having access to Fire, Normal, Electric, and Dark type attacks, but we really do need a special attacker here soon. Thankfully, the Wellspring Cave houses Woobat, a perfect Pokemon that evolves via friendship, so we can get an overpowered fully evolved Pokemon before Lenora, a run-killing fight due to Herdier's takedown, and Watchog's retaliate. However, there's no Pokemon that gives special attack EVs until the Pinwheel Forest with Petalil. But wait, that's a Pokemon White exclusive, so we're gonna have to wait until the Desert Resort to take out Maractus and Sigilif before the 4th gym leader, so we've got a long time to wait for some special attack EVs. Rough, but we'll get through it. With that said though, let's see how well we do against Lenora. Actually, beforehand, we do get some Chesto Berries from Cheren, which should help against Watchog's Hypnosis, and we've got to fight N one more time before getting to her. Though Swoobat ends up soloing this fight as Pidove falls into Confusions, same with Timpole, then KOing his last Pokemon in Timber with another Confusion. Good stuff. Now we can get to Lenora. She leads with Herdier, so I go with Pansage to set up Leech Seed, taking Takedown for 34 damage as my Oran Berry triggers, while also getting some recovery off of Leech Seed. While I can technically survive a second one, it would be on like 2 HP, and I see no reason to stay in and risk the possibility of losing Pansage. So I swap into Blitzel and take another Takedown for around 80%, doing more damage to Herdier with Recoil and Leech Seed. But since I know I have several points to where I can get a new electric type, I take the risk of using Thunder Wave on Herdier so I can get a clean swap into Pignite and get a workup off for Watchog. But Herdier misses with Takedown, saving me the need of getting something like Emolga or Tynamo later, and letting me just swap into Pignite. Takedown does half damage as Pignite comes in, recovers off a little bit of Leech Seed, then gets off a workup as a Super Potion gets used on Herdier, giving me another turn of recovery, and outspeeding next turn to KO with Arm Thrust as Watchog comes in second. Now because we only set up one workup, Arm Thrust is going to need to get a 3-hit here to KO. And of course I get the 2-hit here like a moron. Though because I'm holding a Chesto Berry, I should be fine against Hypnosis, though Retaliate will KO. Fortunately, we see the Hypnosis and it misses, so we save the Chesto Berry and KO next turn to win the fight. Well, that went worse than I had anticipated. Really thought that Arm Thrust would get a 2-shot, and all that would be well with the sacrifice of Blitzel, but now that fight just felt sacky and luck-based. It's a good thing I don't care. Moving ahead towards the Pinwheel Forest lies an outside patch of grass where I can get some Shaking Grass, which is a neat little way of getting new encounters. Mainly, for this game, it's Audino. We absolutely need a tank on this team. We could have used one before Lenora, and quite frankly, I should have come to the outside of the forest before fighting her, but I completely forgot I could. Goes to show how I haven't played Gen 5 in a hot minute, despite these actually being my favorite titles in the series. Despite that, I'll be EV training Audino in HP for a max investment, then splitting the remainder between defense and special defense to ensure that we have a safe switch-in at most times. After taking out Team Plasma once again though, it's a hop and a skip over Sky Arrow Bridge to get into Castelia City, dealing with more Team Plasma since this game's chock full of story beats with them. This isn't to the game's detriment, mind you, but they do cause a lot of ruckus, especially when I'm just highlighting the gym leaders and rival battles, and not necessarily anybody outside of Energetsis. Berg's ready to fight following this scuffle though, leading with Whirlipede as I go with Swoobat, KOing in 2 confusions as Dwebble comes in second. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't just go for Pignite and start blasting everything, but I wanted to reserve Pignite for just Livani, so I swap into Audino and just start trading attacks back and forth, using a few growls to lower his physical attack, then using Secret Power to eventually get Paralysis, and just go to town. I almost end up using all 20 power points due to a few super potions here, but eventually we're able to break through this rock-hard shell, surviving with 14 HP and leveling up to get to Livani. From here, we can just swap on a Razor Leaf, take a regular one and a critical with Pignite, then use a single Flame Charge for the quad effective weakness, KOing and winning the fight. Even 2 criticals from Razor Leaf, by the way, wouldn't have been enough, so I couldn't have been too mad at that one on the second attack. Just after is a double-header rival battle, first with Bianca in the gate before Route 4, where we're easily able to mop the floor with her, as Arm Thrust takes out her lead Herdier despite Intimidate, then Muna gets outed by Swoobat swapping in and using 2 Air Cutters, though Yawn does put us to sleep. However, with her follow-up being Panpour and no ice or dark moves in sight, I'm able to stay in and just eventually wake up and blast her with Air Cutter after 3 turns of sleep, KOing with that and Confusion as Servine comes in last. Now I try to KO with Air Cutter here, and while it's nearly a one-shot, Leaf Tornado and its accuracy deprivation is making it nearly impossible. So I finally swap out after 2 super potions back into Pignite, and of course just a single Flame Charge is enough to KO from full HP and win me the fight. Sheesh, should have started that from the beginning. I knew Pignite was strong, but not that crazy. I'm probably going to be very pleasantly surprised by Emboar, I can tell. Oh, and before we head up to the fight against Charon, I delved back into Castelia City to grab the Leaf Stone for Pansage. After all, now that we've gotten Seed Bomb by level up, we really don't need any other moves, getting ourselves Simisage before our next fight. Charon goes with Pidove as I go with Blitzel, one-shotting with Shockwave as Dewott comes in second, and goes down to 2 of them after wasting his turn with Focus Energy. Well, shoot, I might be able to solo this as 2 Shockwaves takes out Pansear after using Yawn, in which it's negated after being KO'd due to my Chesto Berry, leaving just Liepard. Thunderwave connects as he's not a Limber Liepard, with him using Pursuit this turn. As I had predicted, we're not actually going to be able to solo here. I've got to swap out into Pignite, and thankfully predicting that Pursuit on turn 1 means that he's not going for it turn 2, so I can get into Pignite, blast out Arm Thrust, and connect for a 2-shot KO, winning me the fight and giving Blitzel a great physical Electric-type move in Spark to replace Shockwave. Before we make our way into Nimbasa City, I think it's high time we finally fill in that 6th team member, and that is with Sandile, one with an Intimidate ability I might add. I'm super happy to have this ability in my possession once again, and Ground Dark is a very nice addition to the typing pool that I have right now, giving me an effective out to Electric and Rock types, especially the latter since Electric doesn't have much to deal with outside of the Immune Emolga. Speaking of which, the 4th gym leader in Elisa happens to have 2 of them, so that should be quite an ordeal to get through. Beforehand though, we've got to fight N so that our nice dinner date and Ferris wheel ride actually give us some purpose. He leads off with Sandile, so we're able to blast that with Simisage's Seed Bomb to KO in one shot, as Darumaka comes out second. So I swap into Pignite here to KO with 2 Arm Thrusts, taking Fire Punch and Facade for some decent damage, but not enough to worry. Third out is Sigilif, and because I don't have a clean out to this, I just go with Audino and start spamming Secret Power. And eventually that works, and Sigilif dies. Sometimes you just need to press the A button hard enough. This leaves just Scraggy, and since Audino is at half HP, I swap into Swoobat, using Air Cutter to KO after taking a Brick Break for minimal damage to win the fight. Sorry, you green-haired, gorgeous twink man, you. I'm just gonna have to keep beating your face into the ground despite it being so... I should shut up. Following that is the battle against Elisa, and boy, this one is just flying by the seat of my pants because it seems like I have no idea what I'm doing, despite having a somewhat clear strategy and kind of realizing what I need to effectively change around once I go because nothing works as planned. So, since she leads Emolga, I go with our newly evolved Zebstrika to ensure that she doesn't go for Volt Switch, hitting Spark for over half, then using Flame Charge as I expect her to swap for Zebstrika. Sure enough, I'm right, though sadly she's allowed to use healing items and I'm not. She's able to outpace my damage because of that, so I have to swap into Pignite, taking a little over half from a Spark. Why are you going for Spark? I just had Zebstrika in. It has Lightning Rod. That was just blatant AI cheating and reading inputs. Well, I guess I have to swap into Audino, take a little from Volt Switch going back into an Emolga, then immediately using another to go back into Zebstrika so that it gets hit by a few secret powers. Frustrating that I couldn't take it down from around a third and that I've got to deal with a second Hyper Potion, especially once I see the back-to-back paralysis chances off of Spark, even though I had a held Cherry Berry to make sure this wasn't an issue. Alas, Audino is too weak to continue, so I swap into Simisage and finally put this Zebra out of its misery with Seed Bomb. Emolga number 2 comes in at full HP though, and Aerial Ace is not exactly a move I want to be taking, so I go into Sandile to get off Intimidate, then use Torment to ensure that she can't use the same move twice in a row, forcing her into a non-Volt Switch turn that also cannot be Aerial Ace, so I can use Assurance, then Aerial Ace next turn so I could swap into Simisage, whom I'm comfortable taking an Aerial Ace at -1, then use Bite to KO. Static triggers here, but another Cherry Berry here prevents this from being a problem, allowing for the damaged, paralyzed Emolga number 1 to come back in and fall to a Bite. Paralyzing with Static. Seriously, this ability has a 70% chance of paralyzing, because it seems to just happen all the time. I do not understand it. And whatever. That's half the badges down, though. The rest of the game should fall into place now that we're getting close to most of our final evolutions. Entering Route 5 pits us against Charon once again, and quite frankly, these fights are already routine for the team. Pignite outs Liepard, Zebstrika KOs everything else, so I'll probably just go over the final battles against him and Bianco when they come around since they're the only ones that are remotely difficult. Following some Team Plasma event down in the cold storage though, south of Driftvale City, we've got our 5th gym battle on our hands against Clay. Now, Clay's got some strong Pokemon, especially Excadrill, one of my favorites from this generation, and probably among the top 5 Pokemon on my list, but that's beside the point. We've got a team that's lacking a water type, which would help here, but we're gonna have to make do. Clay leads with Krokorok, no Intimidate, no problem, as Simisage destroys it with Seed Bomb. Second out is Excadrill, in which we outspeed and hit Seed Bomb for a little under half damage, but this allows for Excadrill to hit us with a Bulldoze Rock Slide combo, getting Simisage to flinch now that it outspeeds before a second Seed Bomb can connect. All good though, we've got a plan B in Krokorok. Sandile learned Dig at level 31, while Krokorok learns it at 32, one level above the current level cap. So by keeping it unevolved until the level cap, we have a perfect out for the rest of Excadrill's HP, KOing and getting into Palpitoad. Unfortunately, we don't have the Quad Weak Seed Bomb as an option at this point, but what we do have is Swoobat and Audino, two rather tough walls to get around. I choose Swoobat first, doing slightly less than half damage to Palpitoad before bringing in Audino, finally KOing with 2 more secret powers through an Aqua Ring and some accuracy deprivation from Muddy Water to win the fight. Not bad whatsoever, actually. Having a plan B definitely assisted me immensely here. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I would have done against Clay, other than go back and grab Basculin as it's the only good available water type so far. Well, besides Tympole, but that encounter was only available outside of the Pinwheel Forest, and that was eaten up, unfortunately, by Audino. But I do believe that saving Basculin for Legends Arceus is the better play instead of actually getting it here, of course due to Basculegion being only obtainable in that game, so that's kind of the reasoning behind that decision. On our way towards the 6th gym, as another battle against Bianca interrupts us, and is quickly destroyed thanks to Pignite's Arm Thrust on Herdier, Simisage's Seed Bomb on Panpour, a few bites from Simisage on Servine following 2 Hyper Potions, and finally, Audino's massive amounts of Secret Power, plus the powerful Lock of Attract plus Paralysis, taking out Musharna to win me the fight. As I said before, rival fights in this game aren't that hard beyond the last ones, especially with such a lockdown on attacks like Infatuation and Paralysis combined. Beyond Route 6 and at the end of Chargestone Cave lies another fight against N, where he uses the local Pokemon once more, this time starting Boldore as I go with Simisage, setting up Leech Seed to break Sturdy, but unfortunately seeing Iron Defense, which forces Seed Bomb to be a 2-hit KO, leading to Joltik. The rest of his team is weak to fire though, so I swap into Pignite, then use Flame Charge to KO Joltik following an Electro Web that lowers Pignite's speed, then KOing Clink and Pharaoh Seed with 1 Heat Crash apiece to win the fight. Perfect! 1 Celestial Tower visit later, and we're ready for Skyla. Zebstrika is the key to winning this fight, as Spark literally outspeeds and KOs Swoobat and nearly does it on Pheasant, holding it down with Paralysis for the turn as Skyla chooses not to use a healing item, going down next turn as Swanna, who's quad weak to Electric, goes down immediately and is electrocuted for the quick win in my favor. Overwhelming type advantage is broken, nothing more for me to say on that. Moving on ahead through Route 7 ends up leading us to another battle with Charon, whom does give me quite a hard time here, especially since I forgot about this fight and was leading Pignite against his Unpheasant, but I'm able to swap in Zebstrika and basically solo this fight thanks to Spark, though I choose to swap out into Krokorok for Liepard in order to get the KO with a dig and return to win the fight. We're getting so close to that Crocodile evolution, by the way, though we're finally getting Emboar following that fight, so I'm quite the happy camper. Especially with the next gym battle against Bryson being Ice-type and all. Speaking of which, 1 trek through the Twist Mountain later, and we're ready to take on that task. And yeah, melting this Icicle Bastard with Emboar was a rather easy feat. Speaking of which, did you know there's a rock in this gym that has no collision detection and lets you skip a trainer because of it? Not too often things like this are missed in Pokemon, but it's quite funny to see that even the games that couldn't have Day 1 patches pushed out for them still had mistakes made. Anyway, Bryson leads off with Vanillish, in which I take the opportunity to set up 2 workups, using 1 Flame Charge to KO after a few light ice attacks, gaining some extra speed in preparation for Beartic and Cryogonal, KOing both with 1 Heat Crash apiece to win the fight. Helps that most of them have better special defense than physical defense, so those Heat Crashes did exactly what we needed them to. With 7 badges in hand, we're closing in on the game's climax, so after taking our bum through Dragon Spiral Tower and kicking several grunts down several flights of stairs, we encounter N and Zekrom at the top, though not quite ready to fight us just yet. Good, since I'm not ready to fight Getsis either. We do get sent on a wild goose chase though, and cutting to the end of said chase leads us to Opelucid City, though not before the end of Route 8 gives us our last rival battle against Bianca. I think this one is one of the hardest rival fights in the game though, and therefore I want to make sure I'm uber prepared and as close to the level cap as I can physically get away with, so I make sure to get everybody to either level 41 or 42, evolving Krokorok and giving us just enough of an edge to make this fight doable. She leads off with Stoutland with Intimidate as I go Emboar, and despite going -1 thanks to it, I decide to go for Workup to undo that, taking less than a third from Retaliate and eventually KOing with a myriad of Arm Thrusts and Heat Crashes through a healing item, not taking any further damage as Simipour enters second. I swap in a Simisage for Seed Bomb, but of course, Scald ends up getting the burn on the first turn, meaning I can no longer one-shot with that halved attack. And now that she's seeing the Grass-type moves, she swaps into Serperior to give me a tougher time. Thankfully, I've got a great counter in Swoobat, in which I can swap in and just start nailing a few air slashes to take her down, leading back to Simipour, whom I can fire off Psychic, against to knock out. Masharn is out last, and despite her using Lucky Chant, she's unable to dish out enough damage with the insurance against critical hits, and goes down in 3 air slashes, winning me the fight. Sweet! And all that's left is the Tube-Line Bridge, Route 9, and Opelucid City itself, housing that last gym leader in Drayden. Fun fact, this guy in the anime is voiced by Mike Pollock, the same guy who did the voice for Dr. Eggman. I remember sitting in the middle of my grandparents' living room and just watching the episode. I heard the voice and I'm like, frantically Googling it because I immediately recognized the voice and I'm like, where the heck do I recognize this guy from? Anyway, funny story aside, he leads off with a Fracture as I go with Swoobat, and despite him having Assurance, I decide to see how much I can test it by going for Calm Mind, and Apparently, that's only once as we take a boatload of damage. That's fine, we can outspeed and nail Psychic next turn for the one-shot at +1 special attack, but with Druddigan coming in second and Night Slash being an available attack on his moveset, we're getting out of dodge and going into Emboar for the resistance. From here, he just keeps going for Night Slash though, despite us resisting the attack. So I start using Workup, eventually KOing with a Flame Charge and a Brick Break, a newly learned TM move along with another Workup in between, giving me just enough firepower, or in this case unmatched battle prowess, to KO Haxorus just as well to win the Legend Badge. Good stuff. All that's left is the last Sharon battle in the league with, of course, Enon gets us to cap off before the first rolling of the credits. Sharon leads off with Unpheasant as I go with Zebstrika, sapping it to smithereens with Spark, though of course due to it being a range we don't KO. So I go for Flame Charge to get that nice little speed boost to KO as we level up to level 47 and learn Wild Charge. The 95 power, 100% accurate, physical electric type move that ends up doing recoil damage, but that's 30 more power than Spark and is the perfect move to KO his next Pokemon in Samurott. Third out is Liepard, and while I figure Wild Charge would KO, it's like 1 HP away because of our range, and the ranges are the bane of my existence, but thankfully he doesn't do anything impactful and instead goes for Taunt, allowing for me to follow up with a Spark to KO and leave just Simisear. I of course swap into Emboar to resist Flame Burst, taking 3 of them for around 65% total damage, using a few Brick Breaks to eventually seal the deal. 1 Badge Gate and Victory Road later, and we're ready for the Unova League. And while we're ready, this guy certainly isn't. I mean, shoot, he's just walking back and forth and back and forth and back and off the screen. What the f***? Anyway, this is the first of its kind in the franchise, giving us the order of choice in the league, which is kinda cool, and keeping them all at the same levels, though with the unfortunately less challenging premise of each member only having 4 Pokemon as opposed to 5, as was the standard in the previous 4 generations. Not a problem though, we'll need all of the slack we can get for N and gets us his fights back to back. I'm starting with Caitlyn here, as I have a ton of Pokemon with Dark and Ghost access, one-shotting her lead Reuniclus with Simisage's Shadow Claw, boosting the power with a held Ghost Gem. Now, I haven't actually talked about these, but these items are just randomly found in dust clouds and caves, and I haven't had a need for them yet, but here we're able to just use them to give us a 50% one-time power boost, making KOs way easier to get. These get nerfed to 30% in Gen 6 and beyond, and it makes sense. They're absolutely busted for not only single player, but for hitting key damage ranges in VGC. I'll tell you firsthand, having played Unividex format in 2011, that some gems were very important, though you could always just go for Whimsicott and beat up on your Terrakion to win the fight. God, that combo is annoying. Wish 10-year-old me realized that it was a thing though, maybe I would have won Nationals that year instead of getting 52nd place. Anywho, Sigilif falls to Zebstrika and Wild Charge boosted by an Electric Gem after taking a light Air Slash. Musharna goes down to Crocodile's Dark Gem boosted Crunch after swapping it on a Psychic that he's immune to, leaving just Gothitelle to get heal locked as I kept tossing Crunch and Foul Play at her to eventually KO and win the fight. Easy enough, makes sense to push the party up that one level with the easiest among them. Second easiest fight here has to be Chantal. If I can out Psychic with Ghost moves, surely I can out the Ghost Lady with Ghost moves. I lead Simisage against her Grigus, and I made sure to retain Bite for this fight exclusively to try to get some flinch hacks here. And somehow, we get the 1% chance of back-to-back flinches, KOing with a Shadow Claw on the 3rd turn and making it to Chandelure without taking a single point of damage. Sadly, we don't have a Water-type Pokemon to take out Chandelure, though we do have Emboar to wall it. Unless we take a critical Fire Blast. Holy shit! How did that do so much damage? Well, I could just swap into Crocodile, take a Shadow Ball, then KO with a Crunch. All good. 2 down, 2 to go as Jellicent comes out 3rd, so I throw out Audino to set up Light Screen, then swap into Zebstrika to take a Brine and blast out Wild Charge to KO in one shot, going down to around half HP thanks to Recoil. I try bringing in Audino on her last Pokemon in Golurk, being completely oblivious to the idea that Brick Break shatters screens, so I set up Reflect, then swap into Simisage, only for it to shatter. All good though, Seed Bomb should KO, and yep, that was a range. Thankfully covered by Chantal's idiocy by going for Curse with her last Pokemon, taking out Golurk and giving me the second of 4 needed wins. Well, that was weird. How about Grimsley then? Well, Emboar is a pretty safe bet. A Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break KOs his lead Scrafty, as Krookodile comes in second, using the Intimidate ability while also threatening Earthquake, so I swap into Swoobat to bait that, then bait a Dark type move as I swap into Audino, taking minimal damage from Foul Play as Reflect is set up next turn. From here, I can start just hard walling with Attract, holding her down with Infatuation, then using Secret Power in the attempt to also layer Paralysis on top of it, eventually coming out on top as Infatuation Paralysis, literally lead her to being unable to hit more than twice. Though, of course, once I swap into Simisage, we see a critical Earthquake. Well, I was trying to prevent damage, but at least we can bring in Emboar for his last two Pokemon, KOing both Bisharp and Liepard with one Brick Break each to win the fight. Awesome, just one fight left, and probably the most difficult among them, Marshall. Not because we're missing a member on our team that hits for really super high effective damage, but because that member of the team is really frail against Rock-type moves. Not to mention Sock has Sturdy, a nasty ability to have on a fighting type like him that has that Rock-type coverage. Marshall leads throw as I go with Simisage, and due to him being able to get Acrobatics, I go for a Flying Gem boosted Acrobatics, which oddly enough both consumes the gem, while also considering Acrobatics as 110 power due to the lack of a held item by the time that part gets calculated, eventually making it a 165 power attack on the first usage here, though that's still not enough to KO throw as Bulldoze is used. All good though, we eat one of his full restores and still outspeed, KOing with two more as Mienshao takes the field. This guy has both Aerial Ace and U-Turn as super effective on Simisage, so I've got to be majorly careful, swapping out into Swoobat and taking a very minimal amount of damage from Jump Kick, and KOing with a single Psychic. Third out is that Sock we were talking about before, and now I've got to get aggressive with stat drops, swapping back and forth between Swoobat and Krookodile to get 4 Intimidates off. Though I will say the 3 critical hits that Sock was able to get off of Stone Edge and Karate Chop was extremely frustrating. Probably the least amount of luck I've had in terms of critical hits all run, or even throughout this entire franchise series. This is to the point where I risked it all keeping Simisage out while it was in the red HP to land Leech Seed, but it eventually paid off, allowing for me to bring in Emboar and use a few workups, leading to a wasted full restore as I KO'd it in one shot with Flame Charge, and Leech Seed taking out that 1 HP from Sturdy. All that's left is Conkeldurr, and with like 4 or 5 workups, wherever we are at this point, it's a free one-shot with Brick Break, giving us the pin and the win in the middle of that ring. Now then, N gets us. I have been dreading these fights for this entire run. N has Zekrom, and while we do have the option of putting Reshiram in our party after grabbing it with the Master Ball, I opt not to, since I'm trying to resist using legendaries as much as possible. I made exactly one exception with Entei and Colosseum, due to him being a nice fire type to balance out my team, but I didn't even think Entei was necessarily overpowered in Colosseum, especially with the numerous boss fights with other legendary and pseudo-legendary threats. Here, though, it's just one fight against one Zekrom, and that's not even a problem. I have a ground type for a reason. After tossing the Master Ball, though, it's time for the final Plasma confrontation. N starts off with Zekrom as I go ahead with Simisage, immediately swapping to bait either Zen Headbutt or Fusion Bolt due to being immune to both, then being able to fire off a Dig for massive damage. Unfortunately, the TM for Earthquake isn't available until post-game, because it would have been able to KO when boosted with a ground gem, and Krookodile does not also actually learn it until level 54, go figure. Dig does around 75% as Giga Impact lands for slightly less than half next turn, KOing and letting me get to Vanillux. From here I'm able to swap into Emboar and take a few turns, nearly taking it out because of a range, only to eventually take him down with several turns of Hail, having already piled up on Emboar. I'm at half HP as Caracosta comes out third, so I swap into Audino to try walling up, though an unfortunate side effect of trying to set up dual screens is that when a critical hit gets through, those screens are kinda out the window, as is Audino itself, as a critical Stone Edge puts him down, giving us the first death of the run. Okay, not a problem, at least we can get into Simisage to both KO it with Seed Bomb, then KO Zoroark with a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break thinking it was Klinklang. Fifth out is the actual Klinklang, who I'm also able to solo with Simisage, thanks to Brick Break and a usage of Leech Seed to prevent a full restore. KOing in 2 shots as his last Pokemon in Archeops is thrown onto the field. Thankfully, I'm expecting a flying move, and we get that in Acrobatics, allowing for me to swap into Zebstrika and KO with an Electric Gem boosted Wild Charge to KO and win. Now then, Getsus. We cannot re-equip some new gems, so we are going into this fight rather ill-prepared and with only like half of my gems remaining. I'm able to get Simisage out against Coffagrigus, and thankfully the whole team is healed in between the fight, though Audino is still technically dead. Thankfully, this is a good spot to be in though, as Shadow Claw is able to 3-shot, but not before Toxic lands as well as a Shadow Ball. Rough, but at least we still got Simisage around. Second out is Hydreigon, so I swap into Emboar and dodge a Fire Blast, barely surviving a Surf as a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break gets the KO. 2 down, 4 to go as Bouffalant comes in third, and while I would love to stick around and try to KO with Brick Break, I cannot. I know it's just shy. So instead I swap into Crocodile for an Intimidate drop in the hopes that a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break plus a second one will do it, but of course I have to get hit with a critical Earthquake to bring Crocodile to minimal HP. Despite us still having the rematches in the Cynthia fight just ahead, I'm in the headspace of, you can sacrifice all but one Pokemon if you need to. So I stay in on Crocodile, going for that Brick Break and getting some massive damage off, but not enough for me to KO, being taken down by a Head Charge. All good, we're still up with 4 Pokemon as Emboar can come in and revenge KO with Brick Break and Flame Charge for the added speed boost. Fourth out is Seismitoad, and geez, we gotta sack Emboar too. This is the first time we're losing a starter. Doing half with Brick Break as we bring in Simisage to bring him down with Seed Bomb. Fifth out is Electros, and Zebstrika gets fed here too, doing quite a bit of damage with Return, 2/3 in fact before being taken out by Flamethrower, leading to me going into Swoobat and KOing with Psychic. Last out on Getsus' team is Bisharp, and we're basically in the clear. 1 Air Slash to Bisharp does some chip damage as he takes out Swoobat, leaving my final team member in this broken down, toxic poison Simisage to come in and deal a quad effective Brick Break to KO and win me the fight on the closest possible thread that I could have made. Holy moly! I didn't think that it was gonna be this bad, but I guess with those back-to-back battles without optimization of held items, it really goes to show just how much those gems carried me throughout those league fights. All good though, we will simply redesign, rebuild the team, and reclaim the Unova region as I see fit. So our 5 new team members, I've got to fill them in and fill up those old spots well, while also fixing up the holes that led to nearly my entire team's demise. Firstly, I can head on over to Route 10 to capture Sawk to replace half of Emboar's typing. Fighting is great, and Sturdy gives me a nice switch-in option with many types to use for attacks on the Crackback. Second is Emolga. Instead of a physical electric attacker, he's a mix, taking advantage of moves like Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, and Acrobatics to do some great damage. Thirdly, Seadra on Route 17 now that we have the national decks. By fishing in one of these rippling spots and grabbing a Dragon Scale on Route 18, we can evolve it and not have to use Seadra in battle. I wanted to save Horsey and Seadra for Let's Go anyway, and reserving Kingdra for a backup plan in case of any Gen 5 game seemed smart. And here we are, using a non-Unova Pokemon in a black and white Nuzlocke. Fourthly, Victory Road is our next destination, and we're getting back our Fire type in Heatmore, having great coverage in Focus Blast and Solar Beam, while of course getting the signature Flamethrower. Last but certainly not least, Golett in the Dragon Spiral Tower. Ground Ghost is such an insanely cool type, especially when it's replacing Ground Dark and filling in many of the same niches that Crocodile did, other than Intimidate. It does all of the things I need it to do well enough, sometimes better than Crocodile, so I'm a happy camper. So then, right back into the league we go at level 73, and we're ready to take them down. First up this time around is Caitlyn once again. She's rocking Musharna in the lead this time as I go with Golurk, using Shadow Punch for slightly over half as she uses Hypnosis. Hits, but Golurk wakes up immediately thanks to the power of a Chesto Berry, KOing with a second as Sigilif comes in second. We don't have a Rock-type move here, so I swap into Kingdra, use a Water Gem boosted Waterfall after taking an Ice Beam, but of course, this is a range, and we barely miss it, so we have to take a Psychic after seeing a full Restore, dealing out 2 more Waterfalls to KO. Third out is Metagross, and I've got a feeling we're gonna see Giga Impact or Zen Headbutt here, so I swap into Golurk, and damn, does that do a lot more damage than I thought it would! I'm able to hit Earthquake for the near KO, but another Zen Headbutt puts Golurk out of commission for the remainder of this fight. So I finally bring in Emolga to survive one, KOing with Thunderbolt as she brings in Reuniclus. All good, now I can Volt Switch for some decent damage as I swap into Simisage, dodging a Thunder and hitting a Ghost Gem boosted Shadow Claw for the KO as Bronzong comes in 5th, whom I set up Leech Seed on as I don't really have a clean out to it. All good though, as I can eventually swap into Heatmore on a Flash Cannon, barely taking any damage and KOing with Flamethrower as Gothitelle is out last. Flamethrower does slightly under half as she goes for Flatter, raising my special attack by 1 stage and confusing Heatmore, so it doesn't increase the amount of damage Heatmore does to itself, so I figured I'd take the minimal risk and stay in to try to get that KO with Flamethrower. But of course we hit ourselves for the turn, taking a Psychic for some massive damage. Well, shoot, we don't have any more good switches, so I stay in to attempt to get that KO with the second shot of Flamethrower, and fortunately, Heatmore snaps out of confusion, KOing with Flamethrower to win the fight by the skin of our teeth. Well, at least in the realm of Deathless fight. Next on the chopping block is Grimsley, whom starts with Sharpedo, an easy KO with Emolga's Thunderbolt as his second Pokemon Scrafty enters the fray, falling to a Flying Gem boosted Acrobatics. Well, a 2-for-1 is great this late into the game, especially when we lose 0 HP in the process. I will absolutely take that. Crocodile is out third and I'm expecting Smackdown, so I'm correct as I swap into Kingdra, KOing with a Water Gem boosted Waterfall to KO as Liepard comes in 4th. Now she's going for Fake Out, then all 5 power points of Sucker Punch since it's her only Dark-type move. So I'm just going for Dragon Dance, and with the exception of a single usage of Aerial Ace, I'm correct, getting to +6 attack and speed in order to KO everything from there with a Waterfall, bringing down Liepard, Drapion, and Bisharp in sequence to win the fight. First time I've actually been able to bust out a sweep like that in one of these fights, and I'm glad it's rare. I hate when these fights devolve into setup sweep after setup sweep, makes for a much less entertaining and enjoyable experience. With that said, we're going against Marshall third, whom leads with Breloom as I go with Heatmore, going for Flamethrower to get that Fire Gem boosted KO as Sock comes in second. So I'm expecting Stone Edge here, so I swap into Golurk to resist that, while also being immune to close combat and retaliate, and resisting Poison Jab and Stone Edge, so while going for 2 Shadow Punches to KO, so pretty good wall there. Out comes Throw third, and now I've got to worry about Grass Knot. Since I'm either expecting that or Earthquake, I take the shot and swap into Emolga, dodging the predicted Earthquake and one-shotting with a Flying Gem boosted Acrobatics, leading to Conkeldurr. Now I'm thinking we gotta see Stone Edge, so I do the same thing like we did for Sock, but instead using Volt Switch instead of Hard Switching, doing some damage while also absorbing Stone Edge. Golurk survives against another Stone Edge at 11 HP, finally taking him down with 2 Earthquakes, the first being Ground Gem boosted as Toxicroak hits the field. Now this is such a low life total that we're basically expecting any move here. I can't bait anything no longer. So I'm putting my bets on either Earthquake or Low Sweep and going out into Emolga again. Though I'm wrong and see Venoshock. All good though, as Acrobatics is still a one-shot, leaving just Mienshao to come out, waste with Fake Out as I swap into Simisage, then Outspeed and KO with a Flying Gem boosted Acrobatics for the KO. Easy as pie, a little off the rails compared to what I had initially drawn up in my head. It went about 90% as planned. Last but not least though is Shauntal, and I left her last for a reason. Her new movesets as well as Drifblim and Frostlass are killers, so we're going to be needing to be super duper careful in navigating through this fight. She leads with Cofagrigus as I went for Heatmore, going for 2 Flamethrowers, though the first, getting the burn, is probably the worst thing that could have happened, as it eats up my Fire Gem and causes Heatmore to take 1 additional attack, since now it's in full restore range. The first Shadow Ball that Cofagrigus uses prior to the full restore should have been the only one, but that second Shadow Ball following the second burn should have never fired off. Unfortunately, that's just the luck of the draw sometimes. Second out is Jellicent, so I'm swapping into Kingdra to quad resist that Hydro Pump likely coming, though because of Heatmore being at such low HP, I'm worried about any other random move. Thankfully, she does just go for Hydro Pump, so I can come in with ease, firing off a Draco Meteor, then swapping into Emolga to take a Shadow Ball and fire off an Electric Gem boosted Thunderbolt to KO. Third out is Frostlass, whom I know I can survive an Ice Shard from, so I just use Volt Switch, going unpunished and going into Simisage. I know, very strange against an Ice type, but if it's not Ice Shard, it's Shadow Ball. No need to go for Blizzard against Emolga, since I'm pretty sure the AI is smart enough to decipher that it would be just a ridiculous risk to not go for an attack that probably gets near the KO. Thankfully, I'm correct, and taking some decent damage from Shadow Ball, but Shadow Claw is able to follow up next turn, being boosted by a Ghost Gem to KO as Chandelure hits the field 4th. Despite Kingdra being at a little under 2/3 HP, I'm still fine to swap it in, taking a Psychic and KOing next turn with a Waterfall. Not too bad, 4 down as Drifblim comes in 5th, so I swap into Sock, using the sturdy ability to survive through an Acrobatics, firing off a Rock Gem boosted Rock Slide next turn to KO as Golurk enters last. I decide to go into the mirror match here as it goes for Hammer Arm, an attack that Golurk is immune to because it's fighting type and we're ghost type. And due to Chantal's continued incompetence like last time, I'm able to KO with a combination of her half HP cut thanks to Curse and a Shadow Punch to win the fight. Awesome! No deaths going into Alder, and I think we're going to be set, since Alder is probably the easiest fight amongst all of them. This is entirely due to his massive amount of Pokemon weak to fire, namely Excelgor, Vanillux, and Escavalier, while also keeping a rather large fighting weakness with Bouffalant and Vanillux, flying with Excelgor and Volcarona. There's a lot of different variables I can hit here to make this fight easy, not to mention that Kingdra's Draco Meteor is more than enough to KO Druddigon in one shot as Kingdra outspeeds, so my calculations should be correct in this fight. Let's see what happens though. Alder leads with Excelgor as I go for a Flying Gem boosted Acrobatics with my Emolga, getting the one shot as Vanillux comes in second. I'm expecting Blizzard, so I go for Volt Switch, hitting for around a quarter, as sure enough, Blizzard is used and misses as I bring in Heatmore, KOing with Flamethrower as Bouffalant comes in third. I know to throw out Sock here since close combat is a one-shot, regardless of any attack he uses thanks to Sturdy, so I just throw him out there, KO, and get to Escavalier 4th. Whom I swap back into Heatmore to take an X-Scissor and KO with a quad-effective Flamethrower. 5th out is Volcarona, and I'm expecting either Quiver Dance or Hyper Beam, so I swap into Kingdra, and sure enough, the latter of Hyper Beam is used and does a little over half, allowing for a single Water Gem boosted Waterfall to KO as Druddigon comes in last, and like I said before, Draco Meteor's able to hit after Kingdra outspeeds, KOing and one-shotting to seal the deal. Told you he'd be the easiest one. Really strange for a games champion, I must say. But, you know which champion has a better team? It's definitely Cynthia, and there's no question about that, so we're capping off with her. She's over in Undella Town, leading Spiritomb as we're leading Kingdra. And you know what would be absolutely comedy? If we could just solo her with Kingdra and Dragon Dance, so let's try it. We start mirroring each other with Dragon Dance and Double Team, all the while I'm holding a Rossberry in the event she goes for Will-O-Wisp, which does happen, and she does land it, so eventually I'm able to get to +3 attack and speed before using Waterfall to KO, leading to Garchomp. Despite replacing Draco Meteor for Ice Beam, I really don't need it. Waterfall should be able to KO here, but of course, I get a minimum range, though a 30% chance to flinch makes sure it doesn't matter, forcing a full restore as the 4th and final Dragon Dance is used, allowing for the +4 attack and speed to pull through and KO Garchomp with Waterfall, then fells the rest of her team. Lucario with Waterfall, Electros also with Waterfall, and the only exception, Milotic, who instead falls to return to win the fight, and give us the official completion of our Pokemon Black Hardcore Nuzlocke. Not gonna lie, super cool to have been able to use a non-Unova Pokemon throughout the post-game of Black, though I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to do the same for White. With White version, I'm just gonna be going over the gym leaders, Elite Four, N, Getsus, the Round 2 stuff, and Cynthia, just omitting the early N fights and all rival fights since they are just very easy to play around, and really not worth talking about and wasting your time with. So starting off here, we're gonna be taking Snivy, my favorite starter in fact out of the entire franchise. This whole line looks absolutely dope. Servine doesn't look like it's in the awkward puberty middle stage like 80% of the starters have, and Serperior is just a majestic snake that can either choke you out physically or absorb your energy through special attacks, all while outspeeding just about everything that moves, so I can't be disappointed there. Though I suppose Serperior V-Star could have stood to be a more playable card, but hey, at least we have Gardenia's Vigor for energy acceleration. TCG viability aside, we'll be going for a physical build with Serperior, as moves like Leaf Blade, Return, Aerial Ace, and Dragon Tail are all worth taking advantage of while also using stat boosting moves like Coil, or in the early game case, Growth. Too bad this also isn't Black 2, White 2, otherwise Serperior could get Aqua Tail from a move tutor to shut down fire types, but I digress. Our second encounter is Lillipup right up on Route 1 with the pickup ability. Sadly, it had to have Vital Spirit if we were going to get Intimidate once it evolves into Herdier. Rather, now we'll be stuck with Sand Rush, but I think just having a bulky Stoutland that can hit hard with normal moves like Stab Return, and coverage like Crunch and Dig should be rather solid. After taking out N, we're able to head through Route 2 into Striaton City, making it into the Dream Yard for the second of our 3 elemental monkeys, giving me Panpour. A great special attacker once we have Scald, though Simipour really doesn't do much else besides that. I guess that's what happens when you lock the only good ice move in Ice Beam behind the post game. Finally getting to the Striaton City gym though, we're going to be taking on Chili, who, like Cress, just has a Lillipup without a stab normal move, plus the elemental monkey of choice, this time being Pansear. I'm able to take out Lillipup using Snivy, going for Vine Whip twice and taking him into the low yellow, taking a bite, then using a growth to make sure I 2-shot following up from here, taking a second bite as I KO with the 4th and final Vine Whip. With the only Pokemon remaining here being Pansear, I just swap into Panpour and douse him with a few water guns to win. 1 down, 7 to go. Gym number 2 in Nickreen City houses Lenora, the normal user. However, we've got 2 more encounters to unearth before then. Firstly, Drillbur from a dust cloud in the Wellspring Cave, giving ourselves, sure, another physical attacker, but eventually Ground Steel should be a rather aggressive type combo, especially with how good Excadrill ends up being in Gen 5, especially thanks to stab moves like Earthquake. Lastly, we're grabbing Throw from the outside of the Pinwheel Forest, this time not forgetting to stop outside of there like I did with Audino before Lenora in Black version. Anyway, Lenora actually starts out here with Herdier as I do the same, and despite Intimidate from my opponent, I'm able to just go for Bite and Takedown as a combo, the latter boosted by a normal gem to KO without any damage as Bite gets the flinch leading to Watchog. I swap into Drillbur as Watchog goes for Leer, attempting to get a one-shot with a ground gem boosted Dig to KO, but we miss the range just ever so slightly, it might as well just be 1 HP. So I go for a Scratch and Dig combo after she heals, and once again, miss the range by probably the same amount of damage as last time. I just hate ranges, ever so much, but thankfully we remain untouched throughout the entire exchange from Retaliate and Hypnosis, so I can KO successfully next turn with Scratch for the win. Now before Gym 3, I need a fire type, and I know just the one. Up on the small patch of accessible wild Pokemon on Route 4, I can capture myself a Darumaka, and while Hustle is irritating, being able to nail a bunch of Bug-type Pokemon with Fire Punch, and most likely one-shot everything, is going to feel fantastic. Case in point, I lead Darumaka against Berg's Whirlipede, one-shotting with a Fire Gem boosted Fire Punch as Dwebble comes in second. I swap out here into Simipour. Now that we've hit the level that we learned Scald, we can go ahead and evolve it, allowing for me to hit a Water Gem boosted Scald to KO Dwebble from full HP, leading to Leavanny. Now of course I'm expecting to bait the Razor Leaf Grass type move here, and by swapping back into Darumaka, I take it extremely well, firing off that quad effective Fire Punch for the quick KO and the win. Easy as pie, and quite frankly, this is the same with Elisa. A ton of my team learns moves like Rock Tomb and Dig, both of which are TMs obtainable in the Desert Resort and Route 4 respectively, so in the case of Elisa and Emolga, I lead with Throw, firing off Rock Tombs and baiting Aerial Ace rather than Volt Switch, that barely do miss the KO, though after dropping the speed stat twice, Throw begins to outspeed, giving me enough time to fire off a few more Rock Tombs to take out both Emolgas with about half HP remaining. All that's left is Zebstrika, and I'm kind of at a loss at what I should be doing right now, though I think it was just me drawing a blank and then realizing, oh, swapping to Drillbur makes sense because 2 out of his 4 moves are electric type, and I was correct, it goes for Spark, then we're able to KO with Dig afterwards to win the fight. I surely do appreciate those available TMs, it's like they were placed in the most opportune positions for a reason. The trouble of gym leaders is pretty much over at this point, as the next 4 gym leaders end up being quite the joke, sadly. First up being Clay, as we can just sweep him with Simipour, using Scald to one-shot his Krokorok, then doing the same to Excadrill, outspeeding both of them. Last out is Palpitoad, and Simipour's access to Grass Knot is finally coming in handy, one-shotting with that quad super effective plus Grass Gem boosted attack to win the battle. One Bianca fight later, and we arrive at Skyla's gym, who I decide to use Stoutland for. With Miss Dralton City having the Move Deleter and Move Relearner, and Stoutland having access to all 3 Elemental Fangs because of it, we can go ahead and destroy Swoobat with a Dark Gem boosted Crunch, Unpheasant with a critical hit Ice Fang, and Swanna with a quad super effective Thunder Fang to seal the deal right then and there. One Sharon fight in Twist Mountain later causing no troubles, and we're headed into Osiris City. Is it Osiris City? Icarus City? It has 2 C's, I'm not sure. But this is for the match against Bryson, leading off with Vanillish as I'm going with Darmanitan, KOing instantly with the newly learned Brick Break, then using a Fire Gem boosted Fire Punch to obliterate Beartic, leaving just Cryogonal to get pummeled by another Brick Break to win the fight. The last Bianca fight later, which you'd think would be worth going over, but after soloing her with Superior's Growth and a myriad of Leaf Blade Return and Aerial Ace, destroying Stoutland, Simisear, Samurott, and Musharna, it's quickly over. Seriously, you had to send in the last Pokemon and break the naming convention. How dare you? All good though, as we hit the antique version of Opelucid City in order to fight Iris instead of Drayden, though her team is practically identical to Drayden's in black, so I have no idea why they did this. I'm once again going with Darmanitan as she goes Fracture, trading Dragon Dance and Work Up back and forth for 2 turns as she gets greedy and goes for a 3rd, while I just go for Brick Break and KO after she outspeeds, leading to Druddigan. This one has Sheer Force instead of Rough Skin, so using 2 Brick Breaks while at +2 isn't a problem to take her down, taking a Night Slash for a little under a 3rd in the process. Last out is Haxorus, and at +2 with a Fire Gem, Flare Blitz is more than enough to get the knockout, outspeeding and bypassing any potential killing blow to win the Legend Badge. 8 for 8, let's go and fight that there Pokemon League. So, of course, the last fight of Charon is a bit of a roadblock, but if I'm being honest, Excadrill just solos this fight, now to having access to Swords Dance, using a mix of Rock Slide, Earthquake, and Metal Claw to beat down Unpheasant, Emboar, Simisage, and Liepard to win the fight straight away. Excadrill is, like, the S-tier team member, and I've gotta ensure that she never falls in battle due to practically being an instant kill button. As we enter the league though, I'm deciding on my order and we're going with Grimsley first. He's the easiest to break down thanks to many of my team members having fighting type moves, with Darmanitan being the perfect Pokemon as we can set up 2 workups, then KO Scrafty with a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break. With Krookodile out second, Intimidate brings us down to +1, but Brick Break is still super effective, more than enough to KO. Third is Liepard, doing minor damage with Fake Out and going down to Brick Break next turn, as does Bisharp after being outsped to win the fight. Second on my radar is Caitlyn, due to Excadrill having access to X-Scissor by TM, the perfect super effective move to pair with Swords Dance. However, due to that lead Reuniclus, we need to go for a Bug Gem boosted X-Scissor immediately before setting up due to Focus Blast, KOing in one shot and getting to Sigilif unscathed, whom I can set up 1 Swords Dance against while taking an Ice Beam, then KOing it with Rock Slide. From here, I can just take out her 3rd Pokemon in Musharna with X-Scissor, doing the same to Gothitelle in quick succession to win the fight. Now the next target has to be Shauntal, as, you guessed it, Excadrill gets Shadow Claw by TM, therefore overwriting the X-Scissor that we just put on there and becomes the instant kill button I need. However, it's not as nice as you'd think. Cofagrigus has Will-O-Wisp plus Grass Knot, not exactly the nicest combo of moves. However, I decide to go in regardless with a Ghost Gem, going straight for Shadow Claw and getting that critical hit to ensure she goes down. Second out is Chandelure, and Lord knows I can't survive a super effective Fire Blast, so I swap out to Simipour, who takes way too much damage from it, but blasts it with a Scald for a quick KO, as Jellicent comes in 3rd. Now we've got to contend with Energy Ball, so it only makes sense to go into Superior, absorb that attack for minimal damage, and follow up with a Grass Gem boosted Leaf Blade for the KO in one shot as Golurk is the last Pokemon standing. Now this behemoth is quite the defender as we've seen, so I swap into Stoutland hoping to blank a Shadow Punch, but instead, she goes for Curse, allowing for me to just take a quarter damage and KO next turn after outspeeding with a Dark Gem boosted Crunch. Well, that was a lot simpler than I thought it would be, but as we've learned in the last 2 fights against Shauntal, she sure does love being dumb and using Curse with her last available Pokemon for some reason. Anyway, last up is Marshall, likely the only one I don't have a clean out to due to a lack of a flying type, despite having coverage elsewhere with stuff like Aerial Ace on Superior. I decided to lead Stoutland against Throw since I can 2-shot with a normal gem boosted return plus a second one, taking a Bulldoze in the process but still outspeeding on the second as Conkeldurr comes in. Now this guy, I have no chance of getting through without a Pokemon that I lose unless I can get a low enough roll off of Hammer Arm with Darmanitan. So I swap in, take the attack, and boy, that seems awfully low, but only one way to find out. A Fire Gem boosted Flare Blitz lands and KOs, but for Darmanitan, it's a brief brush with disaster, surviving on 9 HP as Sock comes in third. Whew! I can swap out here into Superior and blast out a return and Flying Gem boosted Aerial Ace, while taking 2 Stone Edges to the face, barely outpacing the damage and KOing while Superior is at low yellow HP. Mienshao is all that remains of his team, so he has U-turn, therefore we need to get the heck out of dodge. So I swap out into Throw expecting it, but upon seeing a critical jump kick, I'm kinda just like, well, I've got one choice, better hope it one-shots. So I bring out Simipour on a jump kick, survive, and go for the Water Gem boosted Scald. And of course we do end up getting the one-shot, going unpunished and making it through to N without any losses. Yeah, I thought that Marshall fight was gonna be pretty rough, and I justifiably could have lost 2 team members there, hence why I left him for last so I could get the extra EXP from the other 3. But hey, we're here with N, and we've just got some Plasma Pulverization to take care of before we can get to round 2. After Master Balling Zekrom and shoving him as far into the PC as my arm can muster, we're ready. He leads Reshiram as I go with Excadrill, only made sense as I can outspeed here, and I do, going for a Ground Gem boosted Earthquake to ensure that I don't have to worry about fighting a Legendary for the rest of the bout. Second out is Klinklang, or should I say Zoroark, as Earthquake still manages to one-shot despite being neutral. Third is Caracosta, and Sturdy makes this too risky, so I swap into Superior on a Waterfall, taking minimal damage, then using Return as he hits Stone Edge, bringing me down to low yellow HP. All good though, as a Grass Gem boosted Quad Effective Leaf Blade is more than overkill, KOing as Vanillux enters the fray fourth. From here, I can just swap into Darmanitan, taking Frost Breath for a less than a third, then setting up 2 workups as he goes for Hail and a second Frost Breath. Not sure why he wouldn't go for Blizzard, but I'll take it. Firing off Brick Break for the one-shot as Archeops comes in second, and while I'd like to go for Flare Blitz, I'm at too low of HP. Instead, I can just go for Fire Punch and use that boosted power from the Fire Gem to put me over the top, KOing and leaving just the real Klinklang to fall to Fire Punch, winning the first half of this debacle. Getsis is raring to go, but so is Excadrill, and she's got a bloodlust that only an entire team can satiate. His lead Cofagrigus is a death sentence, packing Toxic instead of Will-O-Wisp, while also having Shadow Ball and Psychic as offensive moves against a Steel type. Heck, I can even get an additional break of a turn from Protect as his 4th move, only getting hit with 2 Shadow Balls before I set up 3 Swords Dances to sweep. Earthquake on Cofagrigus, Rock Slide on Hydreigon, Earthquake on Bouffalant and Seismitoad, Rock Slide on Electros thanks to Levitate, leaving just Bisharp to fall to a +6 super effective Earthquake to finally calm Excadrill out of that Primal Rage. Boy, that was a completely different fight compared to the one in black. While that was a near run ender, here it was just, oh boy, Swords Dance goes brrr, and now I can hope you can understand why I need to keep the instant kill button alive. But with no need to replace any team members due to a lack of deaths, I think we can just go into the league again, funnily enough, for round 2, then assess things if needed before Cynthia. Alright, so with the league, I think we're going to be going in the same order again. Grimsley, Caitlyn, Chantal, and Marshall, due to our team setup still being the same. Grimsley starts with Sharpedo as I go Simipour, basically hoping for a free Focus Blast KO, which we do get, so that's pretty nice. Scrafty's out second, and screw it, I'm going for it again. Going unpunished and getting a second KO as Drapion comes in third. Alright, well now I gotta swap. Tactically, I'm expecting Thunderfang for super effective damage, and sure enough, swapping to Excadrill blanks the move, and I KO with an Earthquake on the Crackback, going up 6-3 without a single point of damage on my end. Fourth out is Crocodile, triggering Intimidate and threatening Earthquake against Excadrill, so I swap into Superior to resist the attack, using a Grass Gem boosted Leaf Blade on the follow-up to KO. 4 down, 2 to go as Bisharp comes out 5th, and of course a few super effective attacks in Aerial Ace and X-Scissor exist with this gal, so I swap into Darmanitan, taking X-Scissor and firing off a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break for the KO. Not really the best target, seeing as it's quad effective. Probably should have just gone for Fire Punch and saved it for Liepard. But Liepard has Attract, and it basically walls Darmanitan from attacking for the rest of this battle, getting him so low to where I have to swap out into Throw, so it's not like that play would have mattered. And even then, he gets walled up against down to half HP just because of Attract being such a broken thing in Pokemon. Finally though, I'm able to fire off a Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break to KO and win the fight. For the easiest among these fights, though, that was certainly more difficult than the first round. What about Caitlyn, though? Can we just sweep her like last time? Well, actually, yes. She leads Musharna this time, but the only attacks she has are of the Psychic type, with one of them being Dream Eater matched with Hypnosis. So by simply walking into the fight with a Chesto Berry, we can get a free Sword Stance up with Excadrill and start firing off X-Scissors left and right. She does manage to land it on turn 1, so we only get to +2 before KOing both Musharna and Reuniclus with X-Scissor, getting to Metagross. Perfect, actually, since Earthquake is still super effective here, after Excadrill outspeeds in one-shots, leading to Sigilith. This is probably my best moment to max out the attack stat, having seen no missing from Hypnosis from Musharna, though missing a Rock Slide on my end almost proves disastrous as 3 Ice Beams manages to bring Excadrill down to just 3 HP. All good though, as we KO with the second attempt to Rock Slide, then fire off an X-Scissor on both Bronzong and Gothitelle to win the fight. Probably a bit ballsy for me to go for the second Rock Slide there, but hey, we're fine, so who cares. In fact, we can kind of just do the same thing against Chantal with just swapping out the Chesto Berry for a Roskberry to combat Cofagrigus' Will-O-Wisp. I'm able to use that to get a Sword Stance off, then fire off a Shadow Claw to get a critical hit and KO both it and Jellicent, which disables the move with the Cursed Body ability as Chandelure comes in third. All good though, no Levitate means an easy Earthquake to KO. Fourth out is Golurk, and this is not a good position for me, as without Shadow Claw, I don't really have the artillery to fire off when I'm threatened by Earthquake. So I bring in Throw to take 2 Earthquakes and fire off a Rock Gem boosted Rock Slide for around somewhere between 20 to 25% damage, not really doing too much, but just enough for me to swap in Serperior, taking a Hammer Arm and nearly fully healing with a Grass Gem boosted Giga Drain. Just because this guy's trained in physical attack doesn't mean our special attack is a pushover, getting that KO as Frostlass comes in 5th. Simple solution here, swap for Darmanitan, take a Blizzard, KO with Flare Blitz, easy as that. Last out is Drifblim, and while Aftermath is a little bit of a nuisance, it's not that big of a deal as we can just bring in Excadrill and go for Rock Slide to avoid the need to take that extra damage, though 3 Shadow Balls hit in succession due to missing Rock Slide, bringing us just below half HP as Chantal uses a full restore due to us getting her into the red on the next turn. So I take the chance during that full restore turn to go for a Sword Stance, then a Shadow Claw to grab the KO, taking that bit of damage from Aftermath, but it's not enough to put Excadrill down. 3 down, 1 to go. Marshall once again is the most difficult among these fights, going Breloom first as I go Excadrill, basically doing the same strategy as I did against Caitlyn and Chantal and going with a Sword Stance, then waking up with a Chesto Berry from Breloom Spore. Aerial Ace is then able to hit that quad-effective KO in one shot, as does Earthquake on Mienshao despite being neutral, leading to Sawk. Once again, we are being kinda screwed over by Sturdy, forcing myself to swap into Throw and take 2 close combats, living on just 19 HP as we manage to land a huge Fighting Gem boosted Brick Break to bring him down to 1 HP, swapping into Serperior as the full restore brings him back to full, then firing off a Grass Gem boosted Leaf Blade and Aerial Ace in combination to KO as he misses Stone Edge. Well, this is perfect as Toxicroak comes in, and since he's going to be using a Poison type move to hit for super effective damage while Serperior's at full HP, I can swap into Excadrill and basically blanket due to the Steel type immunity, then fire off Earthquake for the KO, leading to Throw. Now, this guy is a very big frustration. I swap back into Serperior to take care of him, but turns out that Revenge does over half. Oh well, at least I can bring in Simipour to take care of it, though once I see that burn from Scald, I realized I f***ed up big time. This guy has the ability Guts, and I might get brought down by this superpower, but thankfully Simipour lives on 40 HP as I swap into Stoutland on an Earthquake. I had a feeling it wasn't a fighting type move this turn, so I could easily just survive that Earthquake and fire off a return to KO due to the negative defense that Superpower has brought, as Conkeldurr is his last Pokemon. After weighing my options, I realize all I can do is just fire off a return and then just die to Hammer Arm. And this does a little under half, which is perfect as Darmanitan can come in and fire off a Fire Gem boosted Fire Punch to seal the deal. All good though. Stoutland was probably the worst member of my party without Intimidate, so at least we'll be fine for Alder. He starts Excelgor against my Darmanitan, and surprisingly enough, he outspeeds, missing with Focus Blast and using me first unsuccessfully as I go for 2 workups. Finally seeing a Focus Blast connect for just slightly over half as my Citrus Berry procs, making sure that I can survive a second if need be while a 3rd workup is applied. This gives me more than enough firepower to KO with Fire Punch as he uses me first to get Darmanitan down to just under half HP. From here, it's a pretty simple sweep for the beginning of this party at least. Brick Break on Bouffalant, Fire Punch on Excavalier, and Flare Blitz on Volcarona takes care of most of them as Druddigan enters 5th. So I just swap into Simipour to take a payback for minimal damage, then fire off an Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam, thank you for putting that TM on Route 13 game, to KO as Vanillux enters last. This is probably the least offensively pressuring Pokemon on his team, so I just stay in and see if I can bring him down with Focus Blast, but of course the first misses as he sets up Light Screen. Then the second lands and it does, well, less than half. Well, that's fine as I can go for Scald for some minimal damage, bridging the gap just enough for a second Focus Blast to connect, getting the KO and the win against the champion. But let's just be honest, the true champion lies in Undella Town, as my 5-member team goes in to hopefully take her down, as I don't want to waste a Pokemon on exactly one fight, especially when Stoutland just didn't really do anything most of the time. Sure, I could have filled that slot with Bouffalant or some other bulk normal type like Cincino, but I think we can just do it without one. Cynthia leads Spiritomb as she's ought to do as we go with Excadrill, and you know what's about to go down. We're gunning with Bloodlust, setting up 3 Swords Dances as she goes for 3 double teams, missing with Earthquake twice as she goes for 2 more double teams, but hey, 3rd time's the charm as we connect without even consuming our Rossberry for Will-O-Wisp. And from here we can just go to town. We KO Milotic with Earthquake, Lucario with Earthquake, Garchomp with... oh, that's an Earthquake from her side, and that KO's Excadrill. Well, shoot, this is why we have Simipour in the back with an Ice Gem boosted Ice Beam. 4 members down, 2 to go as the Electros comes in 5th, and without my ground type, I don't really have a clean swap. So I just go for Scald for a little bit under half, letting Simipour go down to Wild Charge, and the recoil damage is able to apply, as I bring in Darmanitan to get that revenge KO with a Fire Punch. All that's left is Braviary, and while I forgot about you on the first fight, I didn't forget about you this time around, as Flare Blitz downs the now fried chicken, KOing and winning me the fight with 3 team members remaining. Phew, alright, that's half of Unova down, and here's what the Pokemon use chart looks like from this point. We still have Oshawott for Black 2, but White 2 is going to be entirely starterless, as some of the remakes have been, but this should be helped immensely by the reintroduction of non-Unova Pokemon before the postgame. I hope you all are looking forward to that, as we're going to try blazing through the rest of the series before the end of the year. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out, and maybe we'll reach 200,000 by the end of the year. It's a pipe dream, but a man can try his damnedest to reach his goals. Anyway, make sure to follow the Twitter, join the Discord server, like the video, do all the dumb stuff YouTubers ask for to help push the videos to new viewers and help connect the community, yada yada yada. Anyway, I really do appreciate all of that, and I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.